Okay, so the first item then is Petition 1073. It's by Tom Minogue. We've had a petition in the Petition Committee structure prior to even the committee's establishment since 2007. But it's asking the Parliament to investigate and establish the reasons for the apparently disproportionate number of Catholics in Scottish prisons. And I know that in previous discussions there's been issues raised about other individuals from identified other religious persuasions who are also disproportionately represented in prison. Okay, so I don't know, Graham, do you want to maybe respond to questions rather than do any opening comments on this? Given it's a...
I'm happy to respond to questions. Just very briefly, the committee know that we approached academics in the first instance to ask them if they thought there was any merit in research into the issues that the petition raises. In my experience, if you ask academics if there's any further research required, they'll say yes. But they did come back and say yes, and they provided us with some issues that they thought that the petition threw up. What we've thought about, I've discussed this with colleagues in Spice and with the clerk, and what we've thought is that for the committee to get some more information before it actually goes to making a decision on commissioning external research, we could carry out a scoping exercise, because there are issues about how far the research might go. If you're looking at certain areas within the criminal justice system, potentially the research could look at policing in areas of Scotland. It would look at decisions taken by the Procurator Fiscal. It may look at that. It may want to look at sentencing. I think it would. And it may want to look at the experiences of the Roman Catholic population or Muslim population as well. So it could be potentially a wide-ranging research project. What we would hope to do in a scoping exercise is approach one or possibly two academics with an interest in this area and ask them just to flesh out a bit of the detail of where they thought the research might go, any difficulties that it might throw up and how they would overcome them. We would then bring that information back to the committee to allow the committee to make a final decision on whether it wanted to commission external research at that point.
Okay. John?
In terms of the responses we've had so far from academics has been quite useful and enlightening in terms of the lack of research that is really out there. And I know the petition refers to the disproportionate number of Catholics in Scottish prisons, and as you said quite rightly, Convener, when this petition first came before this committee, I had indicated a preference to try and widen that out because religious minority groups seem to be disproportionately represented within our prisons. And it would be useful to actually widen that out. But it's how far we can widen that out. Because I think one or two of the pieces I've indicated is that when you start going down to religious groupings, then you need to start looking at subsections, deprivation backgrounds, social backgrounds, and other issues. But welcome the input from SPICE to try and flesh this out so we can get some meaningful research carried out that would hopefully highlight some issues of concern in relation to the number of, or the disproportionate numbers from religious groupings within prisons, but also, as I know, in terms of socio-economic backgrounds, disproportionate number of people who are in prison from deprived areas. And remember a visit to Berlin 18 months ago where we were told that some of the staff could identify the 5 areas in Glasgow where the majority of their prisoners may come from just by their geography, never mind their religious background. So it's trying to hopefully get that information fleshed out. And I think, given some of the feedback we've had so far from academics, I think it might be a worthwhile piece of research.
Which is members want to come in. I mean, I got a feeling we want to consider scoping, so given the time constraints today, just very brief contributions on this, because I think we're broadly in agreement about getting to the next stage, and then that will be best able to determine whether there is a space for full research eventually. Okay, Robin?
Yes, just to reinforce what John Wilson has said, that I think it would be extremely important to cover all the factors that could or do lie behind whether somebody goes to prison or not.
I think that's the point. I mean, there is a body of evidence out there already that shows that there's a clear link between social deprivation, poverty and offending behaviour. And the academics have highlighted that. I think what we would want is we would want to be confident that any research that the committee commissioned would go beyond that. I would guess that if you were going to commission external research, one of the first things that the researchers would do would be to look at the evidence that's already out there in terms of social and economic deprivation and the link between that and crime, and then go beyond that to look at the issues that the petition raises, the particular issues that the petition raises. The one thing that we would need to be wary of is that it doesn't get too big, it doesn't get too wide, because it would then lose the focus of what the petition is actually looking for. So the scoping exercise would address that. I would emphasise we're not at that point asking them to submit a research proposal. It's just to flesh out a bit the detail as to what they would look at, who they would look at, the difficulties that might arise and how they would overcome them. That information would then be fed back to the committee for a decision.
Alan?
Thank you. I mean, I'm approaching this from an equalities perspective, which won't surprise you, but I do support a scoping exercise. It was Professor Andrew Coyle had said about the unrepresentative nature of prisoners compared to the population. But if you have a look at the number of women in prison, then what you don't want is to make the prison population, mirror the population of Scotland. There are very, very few women actually in prison, and like one of the focuses we've had in the Equal Opportunities Committee is to actually reduce that number, because we find that there's too many there that shouldn't be there. I don't think that's given too much away from our inquiry. So I just feel that this could be an absolutely massive piece of research, and it would be very difficult. Because is it just religious affiliation you would be talking about, or would it be race and colour?
That would be one of the things that the scoping exercise could tease out. Yeah. I mean, the issue for the petition, the original petition when it came in, was the disproportionate number of Roman Catholics in prison, and the numbers they do stack up at that point. But from the sort of the process of us going to academics and asking them to provide us more information, they've teased out the kind of things, and John Wilson did as well, about the disproportionate number of Muslims in Scottish prisons. So the scoping exercise would be asking for detail on what groups are you going to look at, how wide-ranging do you think the research needs to be, but we would also need to be quite careful that it addressed the issues raised in the petition. So the scoping exercise would bring that information back to the committee as to how wide it would be, or how wide it could be. The one thing we wouldn't want it to do is just to go so wide. As you know, Madeline, in the criminal justice system, it's huge, and we would probably have to look at quite a few areas of that to get to the bottom of the numbers that are stacking up. But the scoping exercise, I think, from our point of view, it seems to be a sensible next stage before you actually say, right, we want research proposals set up and we're going to commission it.
Okay, so can we take that forward to the next stage, and we'll invite Graham back at a future date to see the kind of scope that we do, scope of the exercise that could be considered, and then we would then have to determine how we wish to address that particular request. Okay, thanks so much, Graham. Thank you.